Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto video. This is going to be my speculation ahead of Boruto Chapter 67. So 67 looks like it's potentially going to be a very hype chapter. The reasons for that are basically just that after the ending of chapter 66, what happened in those final few pages, there's kind of no real way the chapter can't at least have something of note going on. The other thing that would lead us to believe that something big will happen in 67 is that it's going to be a volume-ending chapter. Each volume, when the series gets collected, is 4 chapters, and this, based on the order that we've had so far, is going to be the 4th of a volume. So the chapter after this, 68, is going to be the first of a new volume, and that gives us some sense that it will either end, 67 will end with a very notable cliffhanger, or it will leave us with just something that will be explored very heavily in the upcoming group of 4 chapters, the next volume. So that's why there at least is sort of hype going into this chapter. And in terms of like the way I always do these is that, like, you know, let's recap chapter 66. At its core, there were really 2 things that happened in the chapter. The first half of the chapter focused on Kawaki has the karma mark that is just a weapon, and the reveal that Amado actually secretly gave it to Kawaki with the idea that it only would activate when Kawaki actually wanted it. That explains why he said he didn't want it, but he always had it deep down and could activate it when required. So there's a little bit with Amado that we definitely still need to come back to. He's very suspicious, he's very mysterious. There's so many questions that we still have about Amado. Ultimately, at the moment, it feels like we are a little bit more focused in on just directly the result with Boruto. So I doubt Amado is maybe going to take too much of the spotlight, but there's always the potential that they finally decide to commit to whatever Amado's plan is. Does he have something more going on? Is he truly now allied with the Leaf Village and he just happens to be a little bit scheming? Or is he full on scheming and something big's going to happen with him? That's what we're still unsure about with him. But that, I think, is more of a long-term plot, and I'll get to it, you know, whenever. As for the, you know, Kawaki's power level, they seem to be presenting him as effectively the second coming of Ishiki. He seems to have most of the main powers that Ishiki developed. The fact that he even has the kind of ocular power to sort of take the small things from the sort of pocket dimension and make them big and stuff like that. It spoke to the idea that, like, yeah, he is effectively, if not maybe at the full power level of Ishiki, he is at least enough of the level that Ishiki was at, that he is still one of the most powerful characters, if not the most powerful character that we know of in a way in the series. So it makes Kawaki a major threat, and the thing at least that we know is that he's at least allied with Naruto. He won't do anything that would directly put Naruto in danger, but in his efforts to protect Naruto, he might put other characters in danger. And while what he does, transitioning into the other big thing that happens in the chapter here, which is Boruto is effectively killed. Kawaki lands what looks like a lethal blow on Boruto, part of their plan to basically deal with Momoshiki and the threat of Boruto being overtaken by Momoshiki. This is sort of the last-ditch attempt, which is Boruto sacrificing himself and basically dying, and in the process getting rid of Momoshiki. And this is part of the plan that they came up with. Kawaki executes it, realizing the threat that this could have effectively to Naruto. That informs most of Kawaki's actions. But there's definitely a sense for, like, Kawaki does this, but, you know, this is a character he does ultimately consider to be his brother. So the big thing going into next chapter is you just have to resolve. You have to at least set the next stage for what's actually happening with Boruto. Has he just been flat out killed on the spot by this devastating blow? Is he dying and we're going to have to quickly rush to find some sort of a way to deal with what's happening? Or is something more unique going to happen relating to either, Momoshiki, the Otsutsuki related stuff? Is the Jogon going to come into play? There are a lot of the general ideas that I think we have for how they're going to resolve that. The other thing is just that the fact that this injury was caused by Kawaki. Characters are going to be reacting to the fact that Kawaki did this. And while ultimately they will have to acknowledge the fact that Boruto had this plan, he sacrificed himself, other characters have made kind of similar sacrifices. Naruto was effectively about to do something very similar until Kurama revealed that Baryon mode only killed him and not actually killed Naruto. So Naruto, it'll be interesting to see how he addresses Boruto's reaction and Kawaki's what he did. That he'll have to be like, it was heroic, it is something that I would do, and I'm proud of him for that to some extent, but it's also crazy that, like, I couldn't do anything to prevent that. So he's going to be blaming himself for that. And then with Kawaki, this character he put so much on the line for, to, like, have hope in. Yes, again, it was Boruto's plan, and Kawaki just did this again to ultimately help protect people if Momoshiki was going to go on a rampage. He's still going to be upset about the fact that Kawaki did this. It's going to change their relationship, I suppose, in part. And that's what's so interesting about, like, the potential of the series as it goes forward, of what if Boruto is just dead for, like, a bunch of chapters? We know he comes back eventually, and that's the ultimate thing to remember in all of this. Boruto Chapter 1, the opening scene, the flash forward, we know we have an older Boruto at some stage in the future. It's just, we don't really know how he got there, and especially now that he's quote-unquote been killed, we really don't know how he got there. So that's what makes a lot of this very interesting, in that, like, it's not the sense that, like, oh, it's just, oh my god, the main character's been killed. It's, okay, he's been killed, but now what are they going to do, given that he's going to be revived, resurrected at some point, and they've created a few pathways for that to actually happen? How do they go about it? So let's get, I suppose, some of this stuff straight out of the way. I would be very surprised if they just went with the idea that we need to bring him to a healer, a character with medical ninjutsu. Like, Sakura can heal this wound. If they go that road, I think that's very, very unsatisfying, getting across that this is a wound he can potentially recover from. I think if they're going to do anything, they probably should get that out of the way straight away and be like, someone here has medical ninjutsu, this is an unrecoverable injury. Maybe, like, the idea of, like, Naruto, if he still had the power, like, he can restore, like, Kakashi's eye at the end of the series, maybe Naruto could do something here, but he doesn't have that power anymore. This would require mind-numbing, crazy healing abilities, which, for the most part, no one really has. That would be too much of, I think, a cop-out for the magnitude of a cliffhanger it actually was. I think, similarly, doing something like Momoshiki takes over again and just heals it because his side of the power works that way. That would also feel like a cop-out, that, like, effectively just the Momoshiki thing can bring him back from any place he possibly is. I think they've done enough to create the sort of limitations that, like, Momoshiki's power is still limited by the limitations of Boruto's body and energy to a certain degree, that I don't think that is the case here, like, at all. So for me, it leaves the result of this as being, you either have to do some sort of a thing with the sort of karma resurrection, someone has been implanted with the karma mark, and Boruto is going to die. He dies, but he'll resurrect at some point into whatever character the karma has been placed on. Now, that might involve a little bit of sort of retconning and, like, saying that, oh, like they've done before, he actually implanted the karma mark on this character during this scene. You just missed it or didn't realize that that's what was happening at the time. They might do that. Again, they'd probably need to go into a little bit of detail to explain the distinction of, like, they seem to imply that Boruto can implant a karma mark in someone and revive himself, whereas most of what we've learned is that, like, it's the Otsutsuki power specifically. Like, it will be a Momoshiki karma mark. But I think the implication of what they're going for with Boruto as well as Kawaki is that because their bodies are Otsutsukified, because they can be used as a sacrifice to the Ten Tails to make the divine tree, to create the chakra fruit, they effectively are Otsutsukis. And usually the case is that the Otsutsuki who has implanted this mark in someone, their will is powerful enough to control whoever's body they are taking over. But because they are planting the karma marks in these people who have very strong bodies and are just powerful characters, there's actually potentially the threat for the Otsutsuki that the person they're trying to take over takes over them. And I think that might get into part of, the Otsutsuki will to constantly sort of, in a way, they're parasites, that they try to take over things to gain power and constantly improve. That's why they're, basically taking the life of planets to make themselves even more powerful. But so it would sort of make sense that if they try and fail to take over someone who is too powerful, they lose their power to that person, that they effectively turn that person into one of their species, but their power is now in control of someone else. That seems to be what they're going for here, that with Momoshiki and Boruto specifically, it is a fight for control over who owns this body and who owns the power. And whoever's in control basically owns both. That's why I think we've seen Boruto be able to control a lot of Momoshiki's power while in control himself. And I think that's what they're getting across. Now, while Boruto is actually in control of his body, he can, if he learns how to, implant a karma mark in someone and it be sort of his karma mark, so long as he maintains control over them. Now, that might be very complicated to get across because you would have to retroactively explain where the karma mark was implanted. But the idea is present in the story because a bunch of chapters ago, Boruto and Kawaki did talk about this, that what about you implant the karma mark in Code and use him as your vessel just in case something happens? Because they were sort of creating the dynamic that almost it's going to happen, that Momoshiki takes over your body, which would effectively kill you, which seemed to almost imply that maybe like a Boruto karma mark is fully separate than a Momoshiki karma mark, and that he would take over your body, you resurrect into Code's body, and Code is the only one who properly like goes away in all of that. It does get very complicated, and they probably need to explain a little bit more than that. The other thing that they could do is Jogon. Finally, in the manga, address the fact that Boruto has this special eye power and fully go into it, have this be the sort of get out of jail free card that it basically is until you properly explain the limitations of its power. It would make sense that that special power is something that can bring him back from the dead, effectively. And it would also be a thing to really help to explain, like, oh, Boruto now has a big power to help keep Momoshiki in check, and this would solve a lot of the problems that they've set up for Boruto with regards to this doesn't explain how Boruto is still sort of in control going into the future, where like he still seems to have the karma-based powers, but he also has the eye stuff in the future. This would help to explain that the Jogon keeps Momoshiki in check, so Boruto basically gets the use of the Jogon and the karma stuff at the same time, so he can use the Otsutsuki powers. Otherwise, I think you probably have to have Boruto go in some sort of an arc where something similar to Kawaki happens, and he also gets a karma that is just a weapon. But I think you probably want to keep the threat and the dynamic of one of the characters actually having an Otsutsuki inside them. And Momoshiki seems to be the character that they're committing to, of like they want to keep him around to have an Otsutsuki voice in the story until what I predict is like later on in the series, like getting more towards Boruto Endgame. I think we probably will more heavily address dealing with the Otsutsukis as a species or like faction and get into who are the heads of the clan, what are they ultimately trying to do, and how can we stop them. That feels like what has to sort of be endgame for Boruto. Why don't we deal with Code here? Why don't we deal with whatever the Boruto Kawaki thing is in the flash forward? we ultimately have to set our attention, I think, on the Otsutsukis as the core threat of the future. And I think the Jogon, as they've sort of set up in terms of more long-term storytelling, the thing with Momoshiki and him talking about it, of like, those blue eyes will bring like pain to you in the future. What does that exactly mean? That the Otsutsuki seem to get what the Jogon is, because you have the sort of the Toneri kind of connection. He seems to sort of know what's going on with that. So just, go into that. Is now the time for that? It seems like the perfect time in the story to actually finally have that be the big thing. What seems like a devastating situation. Boruto's going to die. There's no obvious setup for like the karma resurrection stuff with him. This kind of feels like the only way to get out of that is to use the Jogon and finally activate that within the story. But are they ready to do that? Are they willing to fully connect everything together just yet? I'm not sure. Because the other path they can go on is, like I mentioned earlier, just he's dead for now. And there's no obvious immediate setup for we can bring him back in any sort of a way. And we just are, for a volume or two, a bunch of chapters, just dealing with the fact that Boruto is dead for now. And maybe no one knows what the situation is with regards to future karma marks, and that might be an option, but they don't know he actually implanted it in anyone, and it's just Boruto's gone. That would create a very interesting dynamic in the story, just the loss of that character who has been this sort of centerpiece of a lot of dynamics of like, everyone Boruto meets kind of forms a connection with him in a way. And so him being gone alters a lot of dynamics. Like, that affects his whole family, in that it affects the dynamic with Kawaki because Kawaki did this. It affects Naruto because Naruto might blame himself both for, bringing Kawaki into the family and not being able to save Boruto. And he's going to be the one who has to tell Hinata and Himawari what happened. Sarada reacting to it, Mitsuki reacting to it, everyone. That would be a massive moment to just have the characters experience the death of Boruto, while all the time we as the audience know he's going to return at some point, but the characters have experienced like him just not being around. And it would allow you to develop a lot of other characters while Boruto is gone, and build up some setup for like why he is going to come back or something like that. Again, it's a lot of speculation when a lot of the times I think we get ourselves into these situations as Boruto fans where we think, oh, they could do this, 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 or this. And oftentimes when they actually come to releasing the chapters and doing the writing for them, they take the most simplistic approach to do the exact like least amount of stuff possible. So for anyone speculating about the upcoming chapter, it's just like, if you think a ton of stuff is going to happen in the next chapter, cut that in half, and you're probably still thinking too much is going to happen. That's just the way I view the pacing of Boruto at this point. It's just that that's too much for a chapter. That what you think is going to happen there is probably going to be spread out across like 6 chapters. That's just the way Boruto is. It really takes its time, even though it's 40 pages and it should cover a lot more. It's slow paced in a lot of what it does. Even when big things do happen, it's often a whole chapter to build up to just one big moment. Now, in this chapter's case, the upcoming chapter, they're going to have to, I think, really focus quite heavily and have a little bit more of a dialogue focus on the reaction to what happened to Boruto. A lot of the characters reacting to the fact that Kawaki did this, just the emotion of the situation, panic of like, can he immediately be healed? Is there any karma resurrection stuff going on here? But then you also have the code dynamic of he's going to look at this situation because he's been in the background a bit up to now. He hasn't really done much. And he's just watching this play out and is like, oh, wait, one of the people I could sacrifice to Divine Tree, like his plan, is gone. If Boruto dies, that would leave Kawaki as the only option for someone for him to capture and feed to the Divine Tree. And that at least would be something. It would direct Code's story that little bit more. But it also creates the situation where Code has now seen how powerful Kawaki is. And he's going to be thinking, am I powerful enough to effectively fight Ishiki, which is like where Kawaki seems to be at? And the impression I get is that this probably puts Kawaki, this new power up probably puts Kawaki ahead of Code. So can Code even take Kawaki in if he has to? And might this be the opportunity for, like, what if they get Ada and Demon out onto the battlefield? Demon would neutralize everyone except Kawaki. No, sorry. If Ada comes to the battlefield, she would effectively neutralize everyone except Kawaki, just because of her power to sort of attract people to her. And then, like, Demon's powers, again, like, we haven't seen him properly in action against anyone, and he's going to have a fight at some point. He would be a good counter to pretty much anyone. So that seems like the out of this situation, just because they have very crazy overpowered abilities. But would that be enough to capture Kawaki if they confirm Boruto's dead? And there's a few things with regards to that, because we've been in this situation out in the field here in this battle for quite a while now. And Code wants to bring either Boruto or Kawaki back with him. For one, because Ada wants to meet either of them. I think she preferred to meet Kawaki, but she seems to like the idea of both of them. What's going to happen here? Like, might we get a situation where Code just decides to retreat and just, I don't know what just happened here, I'm just going to back out because craziness is happening? Because he doesn't have much time, because, like, already some reinforcements from the Leaf Village have arrived. The whole village seems to know now that the fight is happening out here. So more and more people are going to come out to this fight, and Code is eventually going to get overwhelmed. So he's going to have to make his sort of decision soon. The question is, like, is this the end of this arc, or is there still another fight to come? That's what I'm not really sure about. I could see them doing Kawaki versus Code, and doing some sort of thing where, like, maybe Boruto's dying. Like, he's still alive, but he's dying. They know he's going to die. Code and Kawaki fight, with Kawaki hoping to do some sort of a thing where, like, he beats Code to the point where Code can't do anything. And then, as, like, Boruto's last act, he puts the Karma Seal on Code. And that's how you resolve the death of Boruto, is by he's going to reincarnate in Code's body at some point. But maybe you end it with a note of, like, wait, is it going to be Boruto or Momoshiki who resurrects out of Code? It was the only chance we had to save Boruto, but we had to do it. That could be something very, very interesting, where they know Boruto could be coming back, but it also could be the sort of end of the world if it's Momoshiki that resurrects in Code. Because, again, I guess the idea is, like, Code's also a very good vessel candidate. That could create a cool dynamic where you create the hope for everyone straight away that Boruto could be coming back at some point, but he's dead for the next, like, couple of weeks, months, and the characters all know that. That would be a really cool, just kind of threat in a way to have over the course of the series, of, like, Boruto's death could be confirmed at any point. And if Boruto's confirmed to be dead, they're then facing the biggest threat they've ever faced. Or all of the threats are gone and Boruto's back. And that's just very interesting to me. The other thing that you probably have to set up ahead of the first chapter, the flash forward scene, is, why does Kawaki send Naruto somewhere? At this point, we believe to save him, based on the characterizations that we have so far, is that he doesn't send Naruto away because he's against Naruto, but he sort of takes desperate actions to make sure Naruto is safe, that affect the world in a bad way. What threat are they facing that Kawaki saves Naruto by doing that, and he's on opposing sides to Boruto? That setup has to come as well. And is that like Code maybe succeeds in some way and the Divine Tree is happening and that's the big threat? It maybe feels like something more has to happen. Like, if they defeat Code and then they sort of somehow find out that the main Otsutsuki clan is heading here, they are shocked that the the fruit from the tree on this planet has not been taken, and they've sent like 5-6 Otsutsukis out here. What's going on? This has never happened before. They're sending out the big guns. That will be an amazing shift in the story at some point, but that's probably longer into the future, because again, we're still waiting for the time skip to happen at some point to get us to the point where the characters are the ages they are in the flash forward, but it still feels like there's a lot to deal with in the present. So Boruto's in this very interesting point where I think people will be fine with the time skip happening soon, but they keep doing just enough in the present day story where we're like, but you kind of have to stay here for a while to do this. So interesting times. I'm just very interested to see what they do, because they have to do something notable because of where the chapter is. Just so if something so big happened, you have to say something about it with regards to the fate of Boruto. But it's also the end of a volume going into the next one, so you have to set up the stage for the next phase of the story. And either it's going to be the big finale to this fight with Code out here, or you go into the result of this arc if this maybe brings things to a close here. That's what I'm not sure about. But I think that's most of the speculation that we can really have here. You know, Amado is suspicious, feels like about all we can really say about that. Kawaki's powers, like I said, he now is effectively, I suppose, one of, if not the most powerful character in the series based on what we've seen. Because if Ishiki was, Kawaki seems to have the core of that power. No one can really stop Kawaki if he chooses to do anything, so it puts him in an interesting situation. Just that he is going to have to deal with a lot of the aftermath to what he has done for Boruto, but he's going to be viewed in a certain way because he went through with this, and that's going to be interesting to see as well. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into Boruto Chapter 67, coming out in about 10 days. What do you think is going to happen in this hopefully big chapter? But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.